Hello and welcome to this tutorial brought to you by Localize. My name is Elijah and today we are going to discuss how to easily translate your Angular application by using the Transloco solution. So we are going to build a simple demo that is going to showcase all the features of Transloco. So in this tutorial we will cover all the basics to help you get started with this solution. So first of all, let's create a new application. I'm going to use CSS. I'm not going to use any pre-rendering. And now once the app is created, let's install this library. And then you will be able to choose which languages you would like to install. For example, let's choose the Spanish and English. I'm not going to use server-side rendering, and that is pretty much it. And as you can see, well, this solution has created a few files for us, so let's check those files really quickly. First of all, we have this Transloco config file. This is the global configuration, but all in all, it is used only by the advanced tools like scoped library extractor or by the keys manager. So if you don't use those plugins, those tools, then in fact you don't need to tweak this config at all. Then also inside the source app folder we can see the Transloco loader, and in this loader we can basically provide how exactly our translations will be loaded. And as you can see, here is our path. We don't need to tweak anything here. It's a good idea to keep in mind that this file is available for you. Then the translation files themselves are available here under assets i18n, and we can see, well, those are regular JSON files. And finally, inside the app config, some additional tweaks were made as well. Because first of all, we can see our Transloco provider and the loader. And then here is the main configuration for our provider. Let's slightly restructure these lines of code, and we can see that here are the available languages, the default language, and well, here is our loader. Next, we should configure our assets a bit, because our translations are present here in this folder. Therefore, open angular.json file. And find this build section, and there should be assets. And well, chances are by default you will see something like that. So it will try to search for all the assets inside the public directory. But inside public I have only this icon file. That's why I'm going to change this assets part to look something like this. So I'm saying that some of my assets can be found here in this folder, I mean this one, but also my icon is available inside public. Of course, if you have some other assets inside public, you might need to further update this configuration. Brilliant. Let's maybe open this app component and let's add the following import, because I would like to translate something with Transloco, and for that we're going to use a special directive. Then this directive should also be added to the imports, and now you can basically utilize Transloco inside of this component. Let's open this HTML file. And let's replace all the content with something like that. And here we can see that we create this T function, and this function will be used to perform the actual translation. So it accepts a translation key and it should return the corresponding translation value. Also, we can interpolate some additional values inside our translation. So this is basically the interpolation. So now, of course, we will need to provide some translations. Therefore, let's open en.json, and this part is basically your placeholder, this name that will be replaced with the value that you are providing here on this position. And let's do the same for Spanish translations. That's pretty much it. Now, well, so far so good, but we don't have any way to change the locale within the application. So I would like to create a new component to do just that. Therefore, let's create language switcher. Now the idea is that within this switcher component, first of all, I would like to get all the languages that we can support, plus the currently set locale that initially equals to the default language. So okay, first of all, let's import our Transloco service and the directive. Also, we are going to use this guy, and well, don't forget to provide imports in the following way. Then let's create the actual class like this, and we are going to have the current language, and we will have all the languages that are supported by our application. Then we can create the constructor. And inside the constructor, we're going to utilize the Transloco service. To get the default locale, we can simply say get default language. It is going to return a string. Then I would like to get all the available languages. But now we have, well, a bit of a problem, because this function might return either an array of strings or an array of objects. If you are using an array of objects, basically you can provide the ID of a language, maybe en, es, etc. And you can provide the label of this language, like Spanish, English, and so on and so forth. In our case, we are utilizing the array of strings, but this label will be provided in a different way, but well, you can utilize this approach. But like the bottom line of this story is that we should properly process the available languages, and so we're going to do this. So we're going to see if that's an array, and if well, the first element is a string, and if that's a string, we just, do this. If that's an array of objects, we're going to get the language ID, and that's that. Brilliant. Now this guy is nearly good to go, but as long as we will need to listen to the change event, because the language switcher is going to be like a drop down, let's create an onChange event. And we are going to get the chosen locale, and then we are going to say set active language. It accepts a string, and it, well, changes the language for Transloco. Then as for the template itself, this template will be really simple. So check it out. Once again, we create this Transloco part. Why? Because I would like to translate the label. Here we are going to say something like choose your language, but in English and in Spanish. And then here is our onChange event, and then we iterate over all the languages, and we just do something like that, and then we translate the language's code into something more user-friendly. Of course, having done that, we will need to provide some additional translations. That's why let's return to this file. And let's say choose a language, English and Spanish. And guess what? Let's also provide some Spanish translations. Brilliant. And now we are ready to utilize our language switcher. That's why let's return to this component. Let's import this guy, and let's add it to the imports array. Of course, don't forget to use it in your template. For example, right here. So this component is now good to go. Therefore, let's say ngserve. So everything is built. And now let's update the page. We can see that currently it's all in English. Let's switch to Spanish, and guess what? We now see Spanish translations. Brilliant. But of course, that's not all. I would like to add some additional components to my application. Therefore, let's create a home component. And inside this home component, I will do something similar to what we did previously. Okay. Then let's basically move our markup from app component to home component. Just like this. So this is basically the same markup as before. Then let's create yet another component for another page that is going to be called About Us. And inside About Us, we will do something really similar to what we have already done. The idea is the same. Then inside the about component.html, let's provide some information about our company. Also, let's slightly adjust our app component. First of all, I would like to add the router link to this import, and this router link should be added here as well. Now this title, actually we don't need it because we don't use it anywhere. Also, let's adjust the template because this part is now inside the home component. But here I would like to add some global navigation. So let's do something like this. So the home and the about page and these menu items should be translated as well. That's why I still utilize our Transloco. That's why let's return here to English, and let's say that here is our navigation, here is our navigation for Spanish. Brilliant. And now I would like to show you an interesting trick, because in fact what we can do is we can lazily load translations for this about component. So unless our user visits this page, these translations will not be loaded by default, so it's really easy to achieve by using Transloco. But unfortunately it involves some additional work. First of all, we need to create a new folder and call it about, so it should be named, well, after your component. And then inside, once again, let's add English and let's add Spanish. Then here provide any translations that are specifically related to the about page, to the about component. And now the idea is to modify our routes. So let's proceed to app routes. Well, currently there is basically nothing inside, but we're going to provide a few routes here in the following way. Don't forget to import this Transloco scope, because it is crucial in order to set up this lazy loading. Then for the root route, we're going to use home. For the about, we will use about. But here is the trick. We're saying that providers equals to provider Transloco scope. So we are going to lazily load these translations for the about page, or in other words, for this about scope. That's why our folder is also called about. Now let's save the changes and let's serve our application again. And let's switch to the network part. We can see that currently I'm loading only English translations, and, well, we're not loading translations for the about page. Then I can switch to Spanish and boom, Spanish translations are loaded as well. But if we proceed to the about page, check it out, we are loading translations for Spanish for this exact page, and the same is going to happen if I switch locale once again. So we can see that this lazy loading feature is working just great. Then the next feature that I would like to show you is localization. So we would like to localize datetime, maybe currency, maybe something else. So we'll need to set up an additional plugin for Transloco. And when this plugin is installed, you go to config, you import this plugin, and you will need to add a new provider to this list. Therefore, right after this guy, let's create a new provider for the locale. And in this case, most likely you will need to perform a proper mapping to include the region. Because, for example, Spanish in our case means Spain, because the Spanish language is spoken in other countries as well, right? So you will need to provide this regional information. And now, for example, the currency for Spanish will be provided in euros, whereas for English it will be United States dollars, okay? Now, in order to use it, let's open home component and let's use the date pipe and the currency pipe. So these two pipes should be added to imports. And now let's simply create some demo data, for example, the current date and some random price. And in order to localize this information, we can simply open the home component HTML and do something like that. So we will use this date pipe. You can adjust the date style, and the same can be done for the currency. This is it. Now, if you reload the page, you can see that, well, United States dollars are displayed in this case, but for Spanish, this is euros, and the date is localized, so everything is golden. Now let's see how to perform some pluralization. So in order to do that, we will need to install this message format plugin. And as you can guess, we will need yet another provider for the app config. So please import this one. And now let's add this new configuration with the locales to load. And now the pluralization can be defined inside your translation files. These pluralization rules, of course, will depend on your language. But for example, in English, these rules are really simple. So we say that I'm going to utilize this plural expression. This is an ICU expression, basically. We say that if there are no items, we say no items. If there is one, we say one item. If there is some other count, we're going to use this placeholder and say items. So it is nothing too complex, really. Don't forget to provide Spanish translations. Now, once again, let's return to the home component. And here, let's add some more demo data. So we'll have some count, and we will have a button that will increment this count by 1. Now our job is to update the home component.html. And so that's how you perform pluralization. So this count, it will be properly utilized here, and depending on the count's value, we will use one of the plural forms that are provided here inside this translation. This is it. So now let's reload the page. It says no items, 1 item, 2 items. Brilliant. And the same goes for Spanish. So this is working just great. Now let's talk about the right to left languages. For example, let's add support for Arabic locale. That's why let's add yet another language here to this list. But also we will need to choose a region. For example, let's use this one. Also, don't forget to add it to this list. And then you will need to pass some translations in Arabic. So I will do it now. But for example, if you don't know the language, you can take advantage of our service of Localize. There you can utilize artificial intelligence to do the work for you, or you can hire a professional translator, which is really cool. Alright, and now, well, the idea is to properly update the direction based on the currently chosen locale. Therefore, let's proceed to language switcher component, and let's import this renderer too, and let's utilize this renderer inside our constructor. Now, having done that, we will need to subscribe to a special event. This event is called language changes, and then we will update the direction based on the language that is currently being set. So this is going to be a new method, and for example, you can provide some right to left languages that you are planning to support, for example, Arabic or some other languages as well, and then you will need to choose the direction, right to left or left to right, and just set the attribute for the document. This is going to be called direction, and this is more or less it. Let's translate this new language code, do the same for Spanish, save the changes, reload the page, and switch to Arabic, and guess what, now we get this right to left, but we can switch to English once again. Nice, really nice. Also, you might want to persist the chosen locale into the local storage of the browser or to cookies. This is actually a good idea to implement this feature. Therefore, we will need to add yet another provider. I'm going to use cookies storage, but you can use local storage instead. Then adjust the list of your providers by doing something like that. Believe it or not, this is it. Now we can restart our application. Switch to the console, and let's change the locale. And you see, it says that the information is now saved to our storage. And if I reload the page, I still see my website in Spanish, which means that my preferences have been saved correctly. And now the last thing to do is to basically deploy this website to production. And first of all, I'd like to do some optimizations to my translations, therefore install this plugin and say save dev. Then let's add a few scripts to package.json. So open package.json, find scripts, and here we are going to have the script to perform your optimization and to build for production. So this command, well, it stays the same. Dist is where you're going to build your application, but this part, of course, you will need to change it and, well, adjust it according to how your application is named. Then we will use ahead of time compilation, and we will use this optimization. Basically, this optimization will flatten your JSON files. It will remove some unneeded commands. Your JSON files will be smaller, which is a good thing. But also we need to do some additional configuration. So here for provide Transloco, let's say flatten. And inside flatten, we're going to say that ahead of time, not is dev mode. And now guess what? In fact, we can run this build production and you will find the compiled version of your application inside the dist folder. And if you take a look at your assets, you can see that those are basically flattened, well, minified. Okay, you can see, for example, that these keys have been flattened through this dot notation. And now we are basically ready to go. So you can, for example, deploy to Firebase. So you will need to install Firebase tools. That's step number one. Then you will need to perform Firebase login if you haven't logged in yet to the system. And then say Firebase init. And when you say init, well, say that you are ready. You will need to pick this hosting. Then you can create maybe a new project, or you can use an existing project. And then it is really important to use the proper public directory. And in my case, the directory will point to this location. So the dist part stays the same, but in your case, you will need to adjust this name. And then you must say browser as well. So it is really important to provide this thing. Then yes, we would like to use a single page app. So we will rewrite all the URLs. As for GitHub, I don't know, you can set up if you'd like. And yes, this file already exists and we don't need to overwrite it because it already contains all the important information. And then once you're ready, you can just say Firebase deploy. Basically, I have already deployed my application to Firebase, so that's how it looks like. And you can see that everything is working just great. Brilliant. So this is pretty much it. That's all I wanted to cover today. I thank you for staying with me. Please subscribe to the channel, stay localized, and see you in our other tutorials.